I'd like to call the Finance, Ways and Means Subcommittee to order for April 14th, 2021. Madam Clerk, please take the roll.
Representatives Baum. Here. Camper. Freeman. Here. Gant. Hawk. Here. Hazelwood. Lynn. Ogles. Todd. Here. Whitson. Here. Williams. Here. Wendell. Hicks.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Members, any announcements or personal orders before we begin? Seeing none, we have a total of 77 bills between our regular, addendum, and constitutional amendment calendars, and we are going to take up the constitutional amendment calendar first. So if you would, please go to your constitutional amendment calendar. Bear with us just for a second. We lost a quorum, so give us just a second. We'll get some members back in here. There's Representative Lynn. All right, members, we are now going to our constitutional amendment calendar. That's going to be item number one. Item number one is going to be SJR 10 by Leader Lamberth. Sir, you are recognized. We have a motion to second. Members, do we have a motion to second? We have a motion to second. It looks like there is an amendment, drafting code 6406. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
We have a motion to second on the drafting code 6406. We have a motion to second. Thank you. Any discussion on the amendment? Leader, would you like to put this on the bill and then have discussion? All right. Any discussion? Seeing none, we're now voting on amendment 6406 to SJR 10. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. We're back on SJR 10 as amended. Sir, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. This is the bill that we had passed last session that deals with the line of succession in case there is a temporary incapacitation of the governor.
All right. Thank you very much. Members, any discussion on SJR 10? Seeing none, we're now voting on SJR 10, moving on to full finance. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. SJR 10 moves to full finance. Thank you, sir. And Leader Lamberth, we are going to grab these constitutional amendment calendars, and we'll come right back to you. I know you've got some bills on the regular calendar. So,
yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. All right, members, that brings us to item number 2 on the constitutional amendment calendar, and that is Representative Towns, HJR 98. Sir, you're recognized. We have a motion and a second. You are recognized. For brief description.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman and members. Thank you very much. As you know, members, what the bill seeks to do is to make sure that we specify in the Constitution that under no circumstances does slavery exist in the state of Tennessee. With that small explanation, Mr. Chairman, I renew my motion.
All right, thank you, Mr. Sponsor. Any discussion on HJR 98? Seeing none, we're now voting on HJR 98, moving on to full finance. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. HJR 98 moves on to full finance. Thank you, sir. That brings us to item number 3 on our constitutional amendment calendar. That's HJR 72 by Representative Todd. Sir, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You have a motion and a second. Please continue.
Thank you. Since 1947, we've had a right to work law in the state of Tennessee, and what this does, it simply puts that into the Constitution. It gives our citizens a right to enshrine that into the Constitution. Right to work simply says that workers cannot be fired or penalized for joining or refusing to join a union and pay union dues. Ultimately, the right to work is about protecting worker freedom, both the union worker and the non-union worker. If a person wishes to join a union and pay dues for the union's representation, he or she should have every right to do so. But if a worker wishes to remain independent, not contribute his or her hard-earned income to union dues, he or she should not be forced to do so. That's precisely the decision that our right to work law protects. And we just want to give our citizens the ability to enshrine that into the state constitution.
All right, thank you. And we do have some folks that want to speak, but before we do that, is there any discussion right now for the sponsor? All right, seeing none. We're going to go out of session without objection, and our first speaker is going to be Toby Patton. Is Toby Patton here? Mr. Patton, I'll ask you to come up to the podium. Please introduce yourself for the record, please. You have 3 minutes, and we'll let you know when that time is up. You may begin.
Thank you. My name is Toby Patton. I am a business agent and a employee of Teamsters Local 480 here in Nashville, Tennessee. I wanted to talk to you guys for just a couple of minutes about the fiscal effects of HJR 72 and right to work. $10,000 to spend to memorialize a flawed law in our Constitution, I feel as though it was a mistake. Constitutional, my point of view about, from a purist point of view, what belongs there is things that affect everyone in the state. Civil rights, women's rights, equal pay for all, things that people can look to and be proud of what's in there. And what right to work is just an attack on labor unions. And I understand, I've talked to Representative Todd and have respect for him, and we just disagree on the points of view of the effects of this. We have to represent, I think we're the only organization that I'm aware of that has to represent everybody. The fiscal effect on labor unions alone is large. We have non-members that we have to process grievances and hear them and get them their pay for them and them not contribute one single dime to what we do, which is a negative effect on us. The fiscal effect on the state. Union families make more money to spend into the economy. They have better health benefits that are zero cost to federal or state budgets. And they have better pensions or retirements to spend after retirement to stimulate a state economy. I'm not standing here asking you guys to form some bill to overturn right to work today. That's not what I'm asking for. I'm just saying it doesn't belong in the Tennessee State Constitution. States that are right to work, they make less money. They have 41% higher workplace deaths and injuries. The fiscal effect there on families that have higher injury rates, $9,000 less a year on average. I think that $10,000 will be much better served to maybe your 10 lowest income public school systems that need it. I don't think that I know you look at the Tennessee state budget and you think $10,000 is not a lot of money, but I think there are 10 schools out there that would absolutely disagree with you that they would take $1,000 to spend this kind of money on something that only affects a very small percent of the people in our state. There's a corporate interest bill only. In my point of view, is a mistake, and I'm asking you guys to reconsider, to look at the history of right to work, where it started, what legislator it started under, what was the real purpose of it when it began, to take a close look at it, because it was flawed from the beginning. It's flawed now. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Patton. Before you go away, members, any questions for our guest, Mr. Patton? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Our next speaker this morning is going to be Scott Arnwine. Mr. Arnwine, are you? There you are. Sir, once they get the podium clean, you may come up. Please introduce yourself. You've got 3 minutes, and I'll let you know when that time is up. You may begin when you are ready.
Thank you all. My name is Scott Arnwine. I'm the steward, local number 519, Knoxville, Tennessee. I'd like to talk about the HCR 72 as far as like the economic ramifications. Spending $10,000 on a flawed law, such as Mr. Patton elaborated on, is pushing that cost over to local governments. And here's why it's such a big consequence. It's because right now the law currently only protects the individual from the union, but does not protect the union from the individual. Right now, my local is spending money on a non-member for disciplinary means. Now, if it's settled locally, it's anywhere from $800 to $1,500. If it goes to arbitration, that cost goes up to $2,000 to $15,000 with no contribution whatsoever. So we are the only organization that is forced to practice a failed business model. So on the face of it, we're going to be sending a flawed law to governments, smaller local governments, to figure out where we have an opportunity to get it right, to revisit this law the first time and open a dialogue. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Arnwine. Before you go, members, any questions for our guest, Mr. Arnwine? Seeing none, thank you very much. Thank you for being here. Members, with that, there's no one else on the list, so without objection, we're going to go back in session. And I'm going to go back to the sponsor of the legislation. You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate the comments, appreciate the involvement that the folks have had to come and testify to the committee, and and even prior to this with conversations we've had. Through this process, there are things that I have learned about this. And again, I want to restate that this doesn't change anything with what the state of Tennessee is doing right now. This just enshrines what we've been doing for almost 75 years into the Constitution, if the citizens so desire. The statements that have been made, I think, are accurate to a partial degree. There is a federal law that we understand has some effect on this. Labor unions are required to represent non-union members when they represent the majority of the employees in that unit, whatever that's defined as. But when they're under that amount, when they're under that 50% mark, they do not. So that statement is true to a partial degree, but that's not a state law. That doesn't change anything on the state basis. We still have what we have today and what we've had for almost 75 years, so there are no changes to that. This just allows the citizens to put this in the Constitution for various reasons, one of which is financial. That's been mentioned already. The GDP growth from 2002 to 2012 in the economies of right-to-work states grew by a total of 62% compared to only 46.5% in non-right-to-work state. I can give you numerous statistics like that that show this is a very positive thing for a state to have this, and to enshrine it in the Constitution solidifies it for our citizens and businesses that are looking to come to Tennessee. We all know, we've seen it, we're continuing to see the migration of businesses to this state because we are very much pro-business. We give a level playing field to businesses. We provide them an opportunity to thrive in a state with low regulation. So we're very reasonable here, and we want to continue that, want to see that continue. So all this does is give our citizens the ability to enshrine this in the Constitution, what we've been doing for almost 75 years. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be glad to take any questions.
Thank you, Representative Todd. Members, any discussion on HJR 72? Any discussion? Seeing none, we're now voting on sending HJR on to full finance. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. HJR 72 moves to full finance. All right, members, that concludes our constitutional amendment calendar at this time. We will now go back to our regular calendar item number 1, and I'll give everyone just a second, including myself, to get there. All right, members, item number 1 on our regular calendar today is HB 358 by Speaker Pro Tem Marsh. Sir, you are recognized. You have a motion and a second. Looks like you have an amendment drafting code 6963. Is that correct?
Correct, sir. This
With-
makes just a small change that, let me just tell you real quick.
Okay, hold on one second. We got a motion and a second. Go right ahead.
This, by deleting language in the name of the county trustee and in substituting instead the language in the name of the taxing jurisdiction. That's all the amendment does.
All right, thank you. Members, any discussion on the amendment 6963? Seeing none, we are now voting on amendment 6963 on to House Bill 358. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. We're back on HB 358 as amended. Sir, you are recognized on the bill as amended.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What this bill does is allow our county trustees to proceed against taxpayers who are delinquent by using a collection agent. Several rules involved in it, but we had a lot of people that all worked it out, and everybody's in good shape with it now.
All right, thank you very much.
Questions?
Members, any discussion on House Bill 358? Seeing none, we're now voting on moving House Bill 358 on to full finance. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. House Bill 358 moves to full finance.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Members.
All right, that brings us to item number 2 on our calendars, House Bill 556 by Deputy Speaker Johnson. Sir, you have a motion to second. You are recognized for the brief description.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 556 renews the annual bed assessment, nursing home bed assessment through June the 30th of 2022.
All right, thank you, Deputy Speaker. Any discussion on House Bill 556? Seeing none, we're now voting on sending House Bill 556 on to full finance. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. House Bill 556 moves to full finance. Brings us to item number 3 on our calendar, which is also by Deputy Speaker Johnson. That's House Bill 555. You have a motion to second. Please continue with the brief description.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 555 renews the annual allotment of 125 new Medicare skilled nursing facility beds through June 30th, 2025.
All right, thank you. Members, you heard the description of House Bill 555. Any discussion? Seeing none, we're now voting on sending House Bill 555 on to full finance. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. House Bill 555 moves to full finance.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker Johnson. Looking for Chairman Faison. I don't see him. We're going to roll him. How many spots I need to roll? 3 spots. Okay. Members, we are, without objection, items 4, 5, 6, and 7. We're going to roll all of these 3 spots. Without objection, roll 3 spots. You've been rolled 3 spots. All right, we're going to item number 8. Item number 8 on our calendar is going to be Leader Lambert. Leader Lambert, you're recognized on House Bill 779. You have a motion and a second. You are recognized for brief description.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, this is the bill that most of you have seen before, but deals with civil emergencies and some of the updates of the code. We need to be able to appropriately deal with those.
All right. Members, you've heard the description of House Bill 779. Is there any discussion on House Bill 779? Seeing none, we're now voting on House Bill 779, moving on to full finance. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. House Bill 779 moves to full finance. Brings
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
us to item number 9 on our calendar. Item number 9 is House Bill 773 by Leader Lambert. You have a motion and a second. Looks like you have an amendment, drafting code 6998. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
We have a motion and a second on the amendment. We have a motion and a second. Do you want to describe the amendment?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. So, members, this is an issue we have struggled with for years on the aviation fuel fund and specifically on fuel taxes in general, dealing with our airlines. And so we obviously want us to be very competitive nationwide and worldwide on having national hubs here, both for cargo and passengers. And so in years past, and even in this year, the amount of taxes that are paid on that fuel is linked to how much our airports are getting for infrastructure. And we are trying to work towards decoupling that. Now, there are some federal issues and reasons that we can't completely decouple, but this bill would reduce the taxes on jet fuel on some of our best companies here in Tennessee that are good corporate citizens, and at the same time would fill that hole, and it would make it clear that it's the legislature's intent that any time we are reducing that fund, that it would be filled with recurring dollars to those airports for infrastructure. I will also tell you that in this amended budget that I know we'll be hearing over the next few weeks, but the amended and proposed budget has a significant sum of money that is placed in the budget for infrastructure for our airports. I hope that we all will fight to have that money in there for years to come, really to the tune of about 40 to 50 million per year. Now, that's not recurring revenues that are in the budget this year, but to be competitive with other states, that's probably about the numbers that we need to be at. But we don't need to be robbing Peter to pay Paul. I mean, we do not need to have this as a fee-based service. We need to be investing in those airports beyond just the aviation fund that's set up. So that's what this bill seeks to do. It gets us part of the way there, and then hopefully in years to come, we can go all the way.
All right, thank you, Mr. Sponsor. Members, we are still on the amendment, drafting code 6998. Any discussion? Chairman Williams, you're recognized. On the bill? Okay. We are still on the amendment. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, we're now voting on the amendment 6998 to House Bill 773. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. We are back on the bill as amended. Chairman Williams, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Leader, for this bill. This is an issue that has come up since, this is the 3rd time since I got elected. My concern about doing this is it's who's driving the bus. Really, it's one thing to say that we're going to fix a problem when I think we're all in agreement that there is a problem. But the reason why we're fixing the problem before, the last time, and the reason why we're fixing the problem this time is there's one person who needs this fix. And I recognize that it's very important for that one entity and group, and they have been a really good corporate sponsor in many ways, and have had challenges in the past as well. But as it relates to this bill, the reduction that we're proposing with the idea of putting the money into recurring general fund dollars still does not close the gap of what the state and airports have come to expect over time. And so my concern is that we continue to do this. Where is the bottom? I mean, where do we want to go? You know, I spoke with these people in the hall the other day, and we said, oh, just get us to $5 million. Just cap us at $5 million. This reduces it as well. And in the hallway just the other day, they said, well, Kentucky's at $1 million, so I'd like to be at $1 million cap. And so my concern is that we continue to do this. My hope is that we would be leveling the playing field and really helping more people across the state and their businesses by doing this and reestablishing a reoccurring fund, which covers not just the loss in revenue to our local airports and general aviation departments, but also in the flowage fees regarding these, because the flowage fees are where they make the vast majority of their monies at the airports based upon the frequency of flights. And so I understand why the leaders here, I understand the administration's principle, but it was just the other day we had issues with monuments. And I'm just really concerned about where we're going and would like for us to slow down and have a more elongated view. Thank you.
Leader Lamberth.
Thank you, and thank you, Chairman, for those comments. And to be clear, subsection C of this amendment makes it, I mean, it lays it out that what a transportation hub is. So while we do not have many entities that have expanded to the point where this would assist right now, but our hope is that we absolutely would. There are carriers out there right now, both passenger and cargo, that are looking at Tennessee because of a bill like this. But we have joined our smaller airports specifically and our larger airports to a fund that this year during the pandemic thus far has only generated about $9 million. And so it's not working. I mean, everything you just mentioned is spot on as far as the funds that are out there. The only way that they can really succeed, and this is for purposes of bonding and everything else, is if we tell them, look, you're going to get X amount of dollars per year, and the legislature is going to stand with you in the airport aspect of this. But 20 years ago, what they did is they said, well, look, whatever comes in the fuel, taxes on this, that's what you're going to get. Well, that fluctuates up and down, and it is just not reliable, especially in a year like we've had this last year. So if we don't do a fix like this, and it's really two different conversations. I mean, how much do we tax corporate entities that are here that have invested in this state billions of dollars? I mean, honestly, I think that amount should go down, even potentially all the way to zero. But that is a conversation we can have. This is a slow walk way to do this. It is a stair step down, which really only has a $3 million impact this year. That absolutely is, that hole is filled for the smaller and larger airports. But the only way to get to where you would like to head, and I think the same way I would as well, is to say we're going to invest X amount of dollars from the general fund and finally say that our small airports and large airports need those infrastructure dollars. There are runways that are closed down in this state right now because we have really linked them only to this one fund. That's not appropriate. It's not accomplishing the mission. So again, this takes another step toward where I think you would like us all to go, which is to decouple this and simply just invest in the infrastructure that is needed.
Chairman Williams.
I think it's a novel idea. I think the challenge that it relates to aviation fuel is much like in my construction business. If I buy a certain amount of building material every day, the state doesn't come back and add money to the general fund to pay, for that lost revenue. That's what this is. I mean, we're saying that we're uncoupling or doing these things, but in fact, what happened is we're offsetting the cost of business for large employers. I just think it ought to be a level playing field. And just because you're big doesn't mean your expenses should be smaller. So I get what you're saying, but it is a big challenge we have ahead of you, and I appreciate the sponsor. I think it's a discussion that I look forward to continuing to have.
Leader Lamberth, response?
Nothing further. Again, I respect the perspective, but I mean, we do have some corporate citizens that have invested heavily in this state, and many times we do recognize that investment because they employ thousands of people, and I mean, it's just, having that balance of trying to continue to reduce taxes while still accomplishing the mission is a Republican ideal that we have struggled with for years just to make sure that we get that balance right. And that's where in this bill I think we've struck, but I understand the concerns for down the road to make sure we continue to strike that balance.
Thank you, Chairman. Members, we do have a guest that has asked to speak, and at first, I didn't have anybody else on the list. Now I've got several speakers. What I'd like to do without objection at this time is go out of session, let our guest come up, have an opportunity to speak, and that may, you may have an opportunity to ask some questions from them as well. So at this time, without objection, we're going to go out of session. And Mr., I may mess this last name up, it's Girk, Mr. Girk, G-E-H-R-K-E. Are you here? Okay, it looks like he is not here. I wanted to give him that opportunity. So without objection, we will go back in session. We're back in session, and with that, we're going to go to Chairman Hall. Sir, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This certainly is, this piece of legislation in the budget document are a puzzle, and we're trying to put all the pieces together, so I certainly support the legislation. The most important thing is, as we're having the conversation, as we look at the fiscal note, the fiscal memo to tracking 6998 is subsequent years, year 22 through 23 and subsequent years, the investment that we're making. So this is not just a 1 or 2 year promise. This is a numerous year promise that we're making to create a reliable fund of revenues. And I will say that there are other opportunities that have been historically funded out of these dollars. There is a flight school that's back in my district that has received some dollars from this particular fund. So there's lots of other smaller entities beyond just our passenger airlines that are airports that we've got across the state of Tennessee. I think this is a good step in the right direction. I think that we, as a legislative body and as a finance committee, going forward for the next several years, need to focus on that line item that says subsequent years, that we don't just do this once, twice, 3 times, that we realize that this is an ongoing investment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Todd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to share something that I've shared many times before in this committee and others. When I see something like this, my mind immediately goes to one thing. Businesses don't really pay taxes. People pay taxes. Every single tax or fee we put on a business in this state is passed down to the end consumer, no matter what, every single time. So if we keep that principle in mind, going forward, if we can correct some things like this, I think it's a really good thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Todd. Leader Camper, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And sponsor, we talked about this before last week. I really wanted to hear the amendment. We adopted an amendment that was not going to eventually be the bill. And so the thing that was concerning me at the time, which I believe you addressed in this bill, is that we created this situation where these smaller airports became dependent on these funds. That was something that this body did before we got here, but we created it as a state. And so to me, it crippled our smaller airports because they became dependent on that. And so when the funds were not there, there were things that they wanted to have done that they could not fund. But it was because we created it. Secondly, the state has to decide, are these smaller airports important enough for us to fund? If the money is in the general fund and we decide how to utilize these funds, are they important enough for us to do that? And I think that with the amendment, we're saying that we're going to make them a priority by funding their projects, notwithstanding the fluctuation with this fund based on, fuel jet. We created this. So I'm seeing this as a possible solution and making them a priority independent of what any other business is doing in this state. So I appreciate, you hearing me on trying to do the decoupling and making it a priority, and I look forward to being a part of the future negotiations as we move forward to how this will be accomplished. So I'm supporting the bill. I think it's a good bill. I think it's a timely bill. We're in a position where we can do it. And as we are prioritizing things for this state and those taxpayers that he just talked about, the time is now, and we need to do it. So I support your bill, Mr. Sponsor. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Leader Camper.
Madam Leader, thank you very much for that. And again, that is exactly what we're trying to do. And I will tell you, I have asked both the small airports and large alike to get to us, and specifically this committee, what are your needs? Because for far too long, they have really just been handicapped and joined to this specific fund. So what are the needs that are out there, specifically even some one-time funding for infrastructure for next year on how do we get all our runways back up and going? How do we get back up to where I mean, this is part of the economic driver here in Tennessee. I mean, if you don't have good runways and airports to be able to bring in passengers and cargo, in the world that we live in right now, you are not succeeding as a state. So this would be a huge step forward, but with lots of obstacles to watch out for along the way. I was remiss, I did not say both of the co-sponsors, or a couple of the co-sponsors in this bill are here, all three with Leader Gant, Chairman Vaughn, and Chairman White. And obviously, you know, from all across the state, this affects all of us, but I did want to mention that all three are here today in support of the bill.
Thank you, Leader. Members, further discussion? Seeing none, we're now voting on House Bill 773, moving on to full finance. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. House Bill 773 moves to full finance.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee.
Thank you. All right, members, that takes us back to item number 4. That's going to be Chairman Faison. Chairman Faison, you're recognized on House Bill 119. You have a motion to second. Please continue with a brief description.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, committee. Very good to be with you. And, Mr. Chair, I believe we do we have an amendment on this bill? No, we don't.
We do not.
Okay. Members, this bill, we currently in law have a thing called the Amber Alert. That's if a child goes missing immediately throughout the state of Tennessee, we can, TDOT and Department of Safety can get out an alert all across Tennessee instantaneously. Several groups, including the Alzheimer's Association, Senior Citizen Advocate Group, say it would be so beneficial if a senior citizen went missing or there was an emergency that we could have the same benefit of that. Currently, it works in a county. A sheriff or police officer could get it out locally, but if we pass this bill, we'd be able to get it out throughout Tennessee instantaneously and called the Silver Alert.
All right. Thank you, Chairman Faison and members. This particular piece of legislation has been covered in the administration amendment. So any discussion on House Bill 119? Chairman Williams, you're recognized.
Thank you. I'm not going to talk on every bill, but I did want to thank the chairman for this bill. My grandmother suffered from Alzheimer's. Very important for the family to know that when they go to the grocery store and leave their loved one at home, if they were to wander far from the house, that there is a process by which we can help locate them. That's what this bill does. I also, too, want to thank Alzheimer's of Tennessee and those folks for their advocacy, not just for these patients, but also for the families. I think this is a good bill, and I'm going to support it today. Thanks.
Thank you, Chairman Williams. Member, further discussion on House Bill 119? Seeing none, we're now voting on House Bill 119, moving to full finance. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. House Bill 119 moves to full finance. Brings us to item number 5. Item number 5 on our calendars, House Bill 189, also by Chairman Faison.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee. Good to be with you again. House Bill 180.
We have a motion to second. We have a motion to second. Please continue.
Almost died for a minute. House Bill 189 would allow local small breweries to be able to distribute alcohol beer outside of their county. Currently, they can distribute beer in their county. And if they decide to opt into this, they would be able to go out. It would take them from being able to produce 25,000 barrels annually to 1,800 barrels annually, but they would still be able to go past their county line.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Any discussion on House Bill 189? Any discussion? Seeing none, we're now voting on House Bill 189, moving on to full finance. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. House Bill 189 moves to full finance. Brings us to item number 6 on our calendar, House Bill 648 by Chairman Faison. Sir, you're recognized. You have a motion to second. Please continue the brief description.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee. Certainly good to still be with you. Currently in our court system, we have papers called original process papers. Our county court clerks have asked us to make it to where they can do everything digitized. And people ask me what original process papers are. That's the warrants or subpoenas. They have to keep them right now, and they've created an immense amount of space to be able to store all these warrants and subpoenas. With your permission, we passed this bill that would allow them to digitize those documents and then not keep them. Most of our courts right now don't even use paper warrants anymore. They're all digitized now, so this just brings us up to current standard. And this is requested by us, to us, from the county Clerk Kurt. You know what I'm saying.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Members, you've heard the description of House Bill 648. Any discussion? Chairman Hawk, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and you need to give a shout out to your court clerk, Kevin Poe,
That's right.
in Jefferson County, who had been thinking about this legislation. He and I, we talked about a year ago, about this time a year ago, and a really good guy. So thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members.
Thank you, Chairman Hall. Further discussion on House Bill 648? Seeing none, we're now voting on House Bill 648, moving on to full finance. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. House Bill 648 moves to full finance. Members, that brings us to item number 7 on our calendar by House Bill 646. Chairman Faison, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr.
You have a
Chair.
motion and a second. Please continue the brief
Committee,
description.
it's an honor to still be with you. House Bill 646 would allow homeschoolers to be able to access the Tennessee Promise.
All right. Any discussion on House Bill 646 by Chairman Faison? Seeing none. Members, I think to let you know, this bill is ready to be moved out if you so choose. There are sufficient revenues, approximate amount of $5 million in available recurring revenues to accommodate adjustments with certain components of existing lottery-funded programs, and this is the one that has been sent to us for consideration. So just to let you know that it will be covered if you so choose to move it out. So with that, any discussion on House Bill 646? Seeing none, we're now voting on sending House Bill 646 on to full finance. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. House Bill 646 moves on to full finance. Thank you. All right, members, that brings us to item number 10 on our calendar. Item number 10 on our calendar is House Bill 1304 by Chairman Sapicki. Sir, you're recognized. You do have a motion, a second. Please continue with a brief description.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. House Bill 419 is a bill that, no? I'm sorry. Mr.
Let's see. You've got House Bill 11, which I think is the one you're on, so House Bill 1304.
Got it.
Yep. You're recognized on House Bill 1304.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 1304, all it does is it makes it a permissive for TennCare to cover chiropractic care over the age of 18. Currently, it's just covered under the age of 18. And so what we're going to try to do is move this bill forward and find funding for it.
Members, can we get a motion to second on House Bill 1304? We have a motion to seconds properly before us. Any discussion on House Bill 1304? Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, Chairman, I think, let's back up for just a second
No
here.
problem.
So we're on House Bill 1304. I think that description was on another piece of legislation.
It was.
Let's back up to House Bill 1304, and it's properly before us. I think we've had about 3 motions and seconds now, so I think it's properly before us if you want to go ahead and describe that one
I'll back up and punt.
briefly. Thank
Okay,
you.
So, I'm sorry, it's been a long day already. 1304 is the second part of the Discipline Act, which creates a mental health part of education. Now, Governor Lee has just put forth the Mental Health Trust Fund. I don't know if this is going to be one of the vehicles that they choose to run with. That's why I'm bringing it to finance to make sure it's in the proper position, but it just addresses mental health for our children in schools.
All right, thank you very much. Members, you've heard the description of House Bill 1304. Any discussion for our sponsor? Seeing none, as he has alluded to, there is a cost associated, and we will have to place it behind the budget and consider it a later date. Thank you for bringing it forward, but without objection, House Bill 1304 behind the budget. That brings us to item number 11. Item number 11 is House Bill 419 by Chairman Spicky. Sir, you're recognized. You have a motion, a second. Please continue with a brief description.
This is the chiropractic bill that allows TennCare to cover chiropractic care over the age of 18. As I stated before, currently just those under the age of 18 have access to this. We'll be looking for the money to fund this, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you very much. Members, any discussion on House Bill 419? Seeing none, as the sponsor again has alluded to, there's a cost associated with this piece of legislation, so we will have to place it behind the budget, consider it a later date. Without objection, House Bill 419 behind the budget. And that brings us to item number 12 on our calendar, House Bill 777 by Chairman Sapicki. You have a motion, a second. Please continue with a brief description.
Thank you, Chairman and members. This is the hold harmless bill for education and BEP that we are running from Governor Lee. We've been working on this legislation since the special session. Basically, let me tell you what it does. It's very simple. For the 2021-2022 school year, Whatever an LEA has received from the state of Tennessee, they will receive again in their BEP funding for 1 year. In 22-23, the attendance that they take this year, in the upcoming school year, will qualify for the funding for the following year in 22-23, just like it always has. The LEAs will be required to stay in compliance, making sure they keep their attendance records, truancy, the normal things that they report to make sure that they will generate a proper number for the BEP in reality for the 22-23 school year. There is a fiscal note of $8 million. However, in the governor's budget, he has put $20 million towards this. So I'll be happy to answer your question, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, any discussion? Chairman Hawk, you recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Sapicki, thank you so much for this. This is critically important to our school districts back home as we look at numbers over the next 12 months. On behalf of our school systems up in Northeast Tennessee, there's even concern going forward the next 5 years. What does this look like? What are we looking at in terms of those students who redshirted early on, the pre-K and the kindergarten age students? What about those students at older grades that moms and dads have just taken out of the system and something's going on there? So this is an issue with lots of depth to it that we still need to have a discussion, and I'm glad we can take care of it for this 1 year, but this may be a 2, 3, 4, 5 year process as we get some more stability in those numbers there. So thank you, Chairman Sapicki, for doing this. Thank you, Chairman.
Well said, Chairman Hogg. Chairman Sapicki, response? None. Members, any discussion on House Bill 777? Leader Camper, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Sponsor, you mentioned that in next year, not the fiscal year we're planning for, but in the 22-23 year, you mentioned something about funding for that year in this bill. Can you explain that again?
You recognize, sir.
Great question. I want to make sure I'm clear on this. We will be taking attendance numbers for the 2020-21 school year that's getting ready to finish up here in May. Normally, those attendance records are used for funding for the fall session coming up in 21-22. This bill addresses that funding measure where we don't know how many children are going to be coming back to our schools, so we wanted to hold them harmless for that 1 year. They will continue to take attendance like they normally do in 21-22, so that when we get to the 22-23 school year, the attendance numbers are accurate and we can properly fund the school systems.
You don't see,
You're recognized.
you don't see any potential to not be prepared to fund them or have money available to fund them if the numbers aren't as accurate as we think they might be. Let's just say, we do the numbers, they do, but we still see that there's some problems that, as he mentioned, the concerns for down years, that is there money available that if there are problems, there's money set aside that we could still fully fund them at the prior year, which would be this 2021-2 year?
Chairman Sapicki.
So if I understand your question correctly, you're looking out in the future for
Yes.
22-23.
Yes.
What if we're still having the same problems?
Right.
Okay, the governor has put aside $20 million for this type of purpose. However, we're only using $8.9 million of it. So in reality, or in theory also, there should be money set aside for the future. However, the bigger concern that we have in education is that if there are children that have been sitting out of our schools now for 2 years, we have a greater concern going forward with that. How do we get them caught up that are hitting our school system that could potentially be 2 years behind already, especially when you look at early education, which is our main focus. We're working on education right now.
Leader Camper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for pointing that out, because that was kind of the point that I was making, because the school will still need the funds to be able to support those children and to give them the services and the training and the education, everything they need to get them back to where they need to be. And I want to make sure that there's funds available for that they could use if we see that that's a problem. So it appears that it's in the budget that way.
Chairman Sapicki.
It is available for possible future use. Remember, all of our LEAs are experiencing $4.2 billion that have been injected into all of our school systems across the state of Tennessee. Just off the top of my head, Murray County is going to receive $28 million for COVID help to address the issues of children that have not come back to their classrooms. How are we going to get them re-engaged in the classrooms, where some parents may just decide, we're going to stay out? How do we make sure that that child gets educated? That's where all this COVID money has to be put to proper use. And then we need to make sure as we move forward, when we see the results from testing coming up this year and moving into next year, remember we had the special session where we're going to have summer school this year. We're going to have tutors this year. We're going to have ongoing tutoring for our students in the 21-22 school year to make sure that we leave no rock unturned to make sure that these kids get the education that they're entitled to in the state of Tennessee.
Leader Camper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Sponsor.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Members, further discussion on House Bill 777. Seeing none, we're now voting on House Bill 777, moving on to full finance. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. House Bill 777 moves to full finance. Thank you, sir. That brings us to item number 13. Item number 13 on our calendar is House Bill 1347 by Chairman Curcio. Sir, you have a motion and second. You are recognized for a brief description.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee members. This is a bill that would deal with the governor's emergency powers. If he creates an executive agency under his emergency powers, these are the powers that we granted to him, not powers that truly rest with him or her. If he creates a new executive agency under that power, this would trigger a mechanism for it to go to GovOps for review, just like all other contracts and agencies do.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Sponsor. Any discussion for our sponsor on House Bill 1347? Chairman Williams.
Thank you. Chairman Curcio, I just want to thank you for this bill. Obviously, we have seen the printing machines smoking in Washington, D.C. This gives us an opportunity to make sure there's some kind of accountability as it relates to how we spend these billions of dollars they're sending to us. I think it's important. We're in uncharted territories in a lot of ways as it relates to these kind of revenues coming to the states unencumbered. This bill gives it a level of accountability that many in this committee have sat on appropriations subcommittee and heard about how the procurement process works and how we had to change really the way that we were doing it because of COVID. I think this bill brings a level of accountability that that is necessary, and if this were to happen in the future, and I just want to draw attention to it. Thank you for the bill.
Thank you, Chairman Williams. Chairman Curcio?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Further discussion on House Bill 1347? Seeing none, we're now voting on House Bill 1347, moving on to full finance. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. House Bill 1347 moves to full finance.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, committee.
Thank you. Item number 14 on our calendar is also by Chairman Curcio. It's House Bill 1440. You have a motion to second. Please continue with a brief description.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll try to be brief. This bill really actually saves the state about $8.6 million every year if we were to pass it. But there is an upfront cost, and it saves money in year 2, unfortunately. So I'm continuing to work on that. But this just kind of separates drug dealers from drug users and really goes after those drugs that are vexing our state right now, and opioids and fentanyl and those sorts of things.
Thank you, Mr. Sponsor. Members, any discussion on House Bill 1440? Seeing none, as the sponsor alluded to, there is a cost associated with House Bill 1440, and we will have to place it behind the budget, consider it at a later time. Without objection, House Bill 1440 is behind the budget. Brings us to item number 15. Item number 15 on our calendar is House Bill 744, also by Chairman Curcio. Sir, you have a motion second. Please continue the brief description.
Thank you, sir, and I would request we roll this 1 week.
All right. Without objection, seeing none, House Bill 744 rolled 1 week.
Thank you.
And members, that brings us to item number 16 on our calendar. Item number 16 is House Bill 888 by Chairman Curcio. You have a motion second.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, committee. This bill expands our expungement statute in Tennessee. Right now, it's working very, very well. We've had multiple years of kind of experiment there, so we're just building on some of that success.
All right, members, you heard the description of House Bill 888. Any discussion? Seeing none, we are now voting on sending House Bill 888 on to full finance. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. House Bill 888 moves to full finance.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, committee.
And Chairman Curcio, if I'm not mistaken, I think you are also going to be running House Bill, well, actually, item number 30.
Yes, sir.
Item number 30 is going to be House Bill 118. Again, that's House Bill 118. You have a motion to second. 1188. Sorry about that. You are recognized on House Bill 1188, and I may have caught you off guard.
That's okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The bill does exactly as the caption reads. I'm happy to talk about it, but it does exactly what the caption reads.
Thank you, Mr. Sponsor. And it does have a fiscal note associated with it. Is there any discussion on House Bill 1188? Seeing none, due to the cost, we will have to place it behind the budget and consider at a later date. So thank you very much. Without
Thank you.
objection, House Bill 1188 behind the budget.
Thank you, Chairman and Committee.
All right. That brings us back to item number 17. Item number 17 on our calendar is House Bill 155 by Chairman Haston. There he is. You have a motion and a second. You are recognized on House Bill 155.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It does have an amendment, 5478.
Just a second here. It is traveling with it. So you're ready.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Committee. This bill was brought to me by the Tennessee School Board Association, and it encourages joint economic and community development boards to include school system representation, and it also allows for JECDBs to form collaborative partnerships that would further economic growth. With that, I'll be glad to answer any questions.
All right, thank you very much. Members, any discussion on House Bill 155? Seeing none, we're now voting on House Bill 155, moving on to full finance. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. House Bill 155 moves to full finance.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Item number 18 on our calendar is House Bill 771, also by Chairman Haston. Sir, you're recognized. You have a motion and a second. Please continue with a brief description.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This administration bill seeks to improve the registered apprenticeship system in Tennessee by establishing a state apprenticeship agency. Tennessee would be the 27th state to do so. By establishing a state apprenticeship agency, it will streamline the apprenticeship application process and should increase completion rates. With that, I'll be glad to answer any questions.
All right, thank you very much. Members, you've heard the description of House Bill 771. Any discussion for our sponsor? Seeing none, we're now voting on House Bill 771, moving on to full finance. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. House Bill 771 moves to full finance.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Item number 19 on our calendar is by Chairman Holsey. There he is. Chairman Holsey, you're recognized on item number 19, House Bill 108. You do have a motion and a second, so you are recognized for a brief description.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Committee. This bill, if I point a gun at you and threaten you, but I don't shoot you, that's a Class C felony. You get 3 to 6. If I take a knife and threaten you, but I don't cut you, that's aggravated assault. That's a Class C felony, 3 to 6. But if I intentionally or knowingly actually kill you in a state of passion provided by adequate provocation, the crime is voluntary manslaughter. And that's a Class C felony, 3 to 6. So what exacerbates that is if juries reduce a first-degree or second-degree murder down to voluntary manslaughter, thinking they're doing a good thing, the judge can't tell them what the penalty is. So it's very, very hard to explain to a family and a victim, the family of the victim, that they lost their life and they're only going to get 3 to 6 years. So this bill bumps voluntary manslaughter from a Class C felony up to a Class B felony, where it ought to be, and that's 8 to 12. And it should have been fixed a long time ago. So we need to do it at some point. That's what the bill does.
Thank you, Chairman Holsey. Members, any discussion on House Bill 108? Seeing none, Chairman Holsey, I know you've been working very hard on this bill, and of course there is a cost associated with House Bill 108, and look forward to working with you, continuing to work with you to try to get it across the finish line. But without objection, House Bill 108 behind the budget. That brings us to item number 20. Item number 20 on our calendar is House Bill 353. This is actually legislation that's going to request a TASER study. So without objection, we're going to send House Bill 353 to the TASER study calendar to be, that date will be released at a later time. So without objection, House Bill 353 moves to the TASER study calendar.
Thank you, Chairman Committee.
Item number 21 on our calendar is House Bill 341 by Chair Lady Littleton. You do have a motion and a second, and you are recognized for House Bill 341 for a brief description.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This was brought to me by the Human Trafficking, the TBI, Human Trafficking Advisory Board. It got caught up in COVID last year, so we're bringing it back this year. Under present law, the Tennessee Standard Treatment Program for sex offenders requires the sex offenders submit an evaluation for treatment developed by the Sex Offender Treatment Board. Sex offenders who require such evaluation and treatment are individuals who have been convicted of certain sex offenses, including rape, rape of a child, aggravated rape, solicitation of a minor, and sexual exploitation of a minor. This bill adds the following to the list of sex offenses: Trafficking for Commercial Sex Act, patronizing prostitution from a person who is younger than 18 years of age or has an intellectual disability, promoting the prostitution of a minor, criminal attempt, conspiracy, or solicitation to commit any of the offenses.
All right, thank you very much for this description, Chair Lady Littleton. Members, any discussion on House Bill 341? Seeing none, thank you. I know you've worked very hard in several years on this now, Chair Lady. There still is a cost associated with House Bill 341, so without objection, House Bill 341 will go behind the budget. Brings us to item number 22. Item number 22 is House Bill 417, also by Chair Lady Littleton. Madam, you are recognized. You do have a motion second.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This bill was brought to me by the youth leadership of Dixon County, and it also got caught up in COVID last year. But the bill, is the amendment, is it going?
It's traveling.
It's traveling, okay. It adds the definition of severe child abuse, the act of knowingly allowing a child to be within a structure where a Schedule I controlled substance, cocaine, meth, or fentanyl is present and accessible to the child. We're seeing now that children are picking up the parents' drugs, and there was a 4-year-old that the parents actually gave it opioid fentanyl, and that child was 4 years old, and it did die. There's a 9-month-old that got a hold of his dad's fentanyl, and he didn't make it. But just a few months ago here in Donaldson, there was a 4-year-old that got his dad's heroin, but they happened to have some Narcan in the car. It took 2 things of Narcan for the child to survive, but I'm sure it's got some damages, but that child did make it. So we're seeing now they're not just exposed, they are picking up the drugs and ingesting them.
Thank you for this description. Members, any discussion on House Bill 417? Seeing none, there is a cost associated with, I know that, again, another piece of legislation you've worked hard on. Does have a cost. We will have to place it behind the budget to be considered at a later date. So without objection, House Bill 417 will go behind the budget.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members.
Thank you very much. Members, item number 23 on our calendars, House Bill 112 by Chair Lady Moody. I saw her come rushing in, so she made it. Chair Lady, you're recognized on House Bill 112. You have a motion to second. Please continue with a brief description.
Thank you very much. We know people with disabilities are a key factor in the state's ability to build a strong, inclusive workforce that translates into economic success and quality of life. So this bill would create the state as a model employer, or SAME, and this program will ensure that state agencies and departments design and implement best promising and emerging policies, practices, and procedures related to recruitment, hiring, advancement, and retention of qualified individuals with disabilities, and it would be administered in the Department of Human Resources.
All right, thank you for this description. Members, any discussion on House Bill 112? Seeing none, thank you for the description. Fortunately, there is a cost associated with House Bill 112, so we will have to place it behind the budget and consider it at a later date. Without objection, House Bill 112 will go behind the budget.
Thank you, members.
Thank you. All right, members, item number 24 is House Bill 542 by Chairman Powers. Chairman, you have a motion and a second. Please continue with a brief description.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Committee. House Bill 542 is the Middle College Scholarship Program. Middle College Program is operated by a 2-year post-secondary institution in partnership with the LEA. It permits students in the fall of their junior year in high school to enter into a 2-year institution and earn a high school diploma and an associate degree at the same time in 2 years. This bill would raise the scholarship fund available right now from $1,000 per semester to $1,250 per semester. Cost about $2,000 per semester. And 95% of the students that complete the program transition to a 4-year institution. So they have a great rate. And we just had, in my county, for example, a 19-year-old that just got accepted into medical school that went to middle college. So we're very proud of the program. And with that, I renew my motion and be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you, Chairman. Members, any discussion for Chairman Powers on House Bill 542? I'll get it out in a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, this is another one of those pieces of legislation that THEC has identified that it can be funded, so we are ready to vote on House Bill 542 if you are ready at this time. Seeing no, Leader Camper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, you said that this is one of these bills that THEC said that they could fund. Is that what did I hear you say?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
Do we have a funding letter?
I do. I have one in front of me. It's actually by THEC. It's not really a funding letter. It's just identifying to us that with that $5 million sweep that they have, that it can be covered. So the higher ed education has only let out bills. So these are bills that are going to be before us that they recommend for passage, and they're watching that number to make sure that they can qualify. We do have Lou, well, is he on the list? Yeah. Okay. So that's, he's not on the list, so I was going to go to him. So I'm sorry we can't, but you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to make sure for the record that, I mean, in the past, we've said that we had to have a funding letter. We, you know, people verbally commit to things, but I want to make sure we had something in writing for them so that, you know, the next time this come up, we're consistent. I see it, I understand we have it. I just wanted for the record to make sure that we had the document in front of us.
Got one.
You got it.
Absolutely. And I'll say this, Leader Camper, as we do receive these letters, we do verify with F&A, and so this one is ready to be voted on. Again, you vote your conscience, but if you're ready to move it forward, it is ready. It is in the proper position as posture as far as funding. You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Chairman
Mr. Chairman,
Powers.
and I do have a funding letter here from THEC and TSAC that identifies the middle college program on it.
Okay, thank you. Members, any further discussion? Seeing none, we're now voting on House Bill 542, moving on to full finance. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. House Bill 542 moves on to full finance.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Committee.
Thank you. Members, we do have a request that House Bill 544 by Chairman Powers be rolled 1 week. So without objection, House Bill 544 rolled 1 week. That brings us to item number 26. Item number 26 is House Bill 319 by Chairman Reagan. We have a motion and a second.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and the amendment code that I have for this is 7029.
That is correct. You have a motion and a second. We have a motion and a second on the amendment. We have a motion and a second on the amendment. Would you like to describe the amendment at this time?
Yes, this amendment deletes all the language, rewrites the bill. Basically, what it does is take care of all costs. The previous note indicated some uncertainty. It said not significant, but then there was some uncertainties associated with it. So what this amendment does is change this to a study, a one-year study, for the Public Utilities Commission to submit a written report to the Speaker of the Senate, the House, the Chair of Commerce, Labor of the House, Commerce and Labor of the Senate and the House, and Government Operations Committee of both chambers. This report should be submitted before July 2022, so that when I come back before you with the bill, those uncertainties will be resolved. And with that explanation, I stand ready for questions and humbly ask for your support.
All right, thank you very much. Members, we're still on the amendment, drafting code 7029. Any discussion? Seeing none, we're now voting on amendment 07029 to House Bill 319. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. We are back on the bill as amended, and you have heard the description. Any discussion on House Bill 319? Seeing none, we're now voting on House Bill 319, moving on to full finance. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. House Bill 319 moves on to full finance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Committee.
That brings us to item number 27. Item number 27 on our calendars, House Bill 1039 by Chairman Vaughn. You have a motion and a second. You are recognized on House Bill 1039. And sir, it looks like you have an amendment 6977. Is that drafting code?
Yes, sir, that is.
You have a motion and a second on the amendment. Would you like to describe the amendment?
Absolutely, sir. I appreciate it. This bill has to do with the replenishment of the Unemployment Trust Fund. the amendment that you see in front of you, we've been struggling to calculating the effects of how much of a benefit increase that we can tie to this shortening term for benefits that will be indexed to the unemployment fund to get the appropriate replenishment level. We started off at $50 per recipient. That did not produce the impact to the unemployment trust fund that we looked at. We went back to $5 to measure that, but we have settled in at a sweet spot of $25 a week increase in benefits for the users of the system. In addition to that, what this does is this gives the Department of Labor, this amendment allows them to extend their implementation to December 1st of 2023. So those are the two changes in this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, any discussion on the amendment is where we currently stand. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, we're now voting on Amendment 6977 to House Bill 1039. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. We're back on the House Bill 1039 as amended. Any discussion on the bill as amended? Seeing none, it does have a cost associated with House Bill 1039, so we will have to place it behind the budget, consider it at a later date. Without objection, House Bill 1039 behind the budget.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee.
Members, that brings us to addendum number 2 on your calendar by Chairman Vaughn. Give everybody just a second to get there. It's item number 74, addendum 2, House Bill 1351. You do have a motion, a second. Chairman Vaughn, you are recognized for a brief description.
Thank you, sir. This legislation contemplates the ability of our universities across the state, both public and private, to comply with the name, image, and likeness ruling by the federal Supreme Court, where they ruled that Ed O'Bannon could receive compensation for the use of his name, image, and likeness. We would become the 9th state in the union to pass such legislation. Our universities, we believe, should be on a level playing field with those who they're going to be competing with in these areas, and this bill would allow them to do that.
All right, thank you very much for this description. Members, any discussion? Chairman Williams, you're recognized.
Yes, Chairman Vaughn, I really appreciate your work on this. I had the opportunity to talk to you about it a lot. I do have one quick question. Would Memphis State be able to use your likeness as it relates to this bill?
You are recognized.
Yes, sir. I'm going back for back royalties.
Okay.
Most definitely.
Thank you, Chairman. Members, further discussion on House Bill 1351. Chairlady Lynn?
Hi there. I didn't actually understand the concept. So name, image, and likeness of who?
Of the, excuse me.
You're recognized.
Of the athletes themselves. Back in the day, there was an NCAA 2003 video game that used actual players' names in it.
Wow.
People sell jerseys with actual players' names on it. It would allow them to endorse, they would be able to make advertisements if someone wanted to do that. And like I said, it is now the law of the land, and this would set guardrails by which our institutions can implement programs to where that it would be appropriately managed.
Okay.
Chairlady Lynn.
Thank you.
Members, further discussion on House Bill 1351. Chairman Hawk?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Chairman Vaughn, I know you've worked hard on this. When I had the Higher Ed Committee last year, we were having broad and deep conversations about this as well. I know it was brought up in jest, but is there a retroactive nature of this legislation? You talked about the video game from all those years ago. Could someone go back and say, hey, my name, image, and likeness was on that video from 20 years ago? Is there a retroactive nature of this?
Chairman Vaughn.
No, sir. Chairman Hawk, this bill only contemplates athletes enrolled today in the university's treatment of said athletes. So that would have to be pursued through other avenues.
Thank you, Chairman, members.
Thank you. Members, further discussion on House Bill 1351. Seeing none, we're now voting on sending House Bill 1351 on to full finance. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. House Bill 1351 moves to full finance.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, where's that send us back to? Okay. Members, that brings us to item number 28, House Bill 471 by Chairman White. Sir, you are recognized. You do have a motion to second. You're recognized on House Bill 471.
Thank you, Chairman and Committee. The reason this bill is before you each year in the Higher Ed Committee, we created a lottery calendar. The reason we do that, there's a lot of requests for lottery funds, and we are very protective of those lottery funds because we're about this close, within a year or two, I'm being told, where that will be self-sustainable in perpetuity for our Tennessee Promise, our Hope scholarships. And so there, we have we're told that as long as we don't take any more than $5 million a year, then we won't violate that. So in committee, the committee voted to have 5 such pieces of legislation come out. 471 was one of those. And what this does is it allows a VOTEC institution in Memphis to participate in the dual enrollment. About $148,000 a year is a fiscal note on that. And having said that, I do have the letter that puts the 471 on one of the 5. So thank you.
All right, members. Any discussion on House Bill 471? Chairman Hawk, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm like one of the other members. I'm kind of chatty today, I guess. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And just as we recognize this, we had the budget, supplemental budget appropriation presented to us yesterday, and there's some increases, $25 million of increases that we're looking at, relocating some lottery dollars. I want to reiterate that these dollars we're talking about are lottery dollars. This is not anything to do with online sports betting at the moment. I know that is a new fund, but we've been very cautious not to create a stream of revenue for that. And I say that for selfish reasons because I have a bill up here in about 30 spaces that we may talk about that. So just to reiterate, this is from existing lottery funds. Is that accurate?
That is correct.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, members.
Thank you, Chairman Hawk. Further discussion on House Bill 471? Seeing none, we're now voting on sending House Bill 471 on to full finance. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. House Bill 471 moves to full finance. Item number 29 on your calendars, House Bill 74 by Chairman White. You have a motion to second. Sir, you are recognized for House Bill 74.
Thank you, Chairman and Committee. This particular bill is known as the ASD bill. Members, back in 2010, the state of Tennessee, the General Assembly created the Achievement School District. We are required to do this by the federal government to have an intervention plan for schools in our state that consistently stay in the bottom 5% or priority schools. We created that back then. Each of the schools that were taken to the ASD had a 10-year contract. But one thing we didn't really put in the original bill was how do they transition out within 10 years? We're now coming up on year 8. I think we're in year 8. And so these schools are timed to transition. So this bill specifically deals with how will these schools transition out of the Achievement School District. There have been many successes. There have been some that have been failures. And we continue to work on this model on how do we bring a priority school in the bottom 5% to make it come out of the priority school. So what this particular piece of legislation does is this lays out how the ASD schools come out. There's three pathways. They can opt to return to the LEA of origin that authorize them. They can apply to the state charter commission that this General Assembly set up, I think it was last year, within the last 2 years, which is formerly the state board, now it's in the state charter commission. Or they can remain under the guidance of the ASD if 60% of the parents, which is already law, have a petition and opt, say, we like our neighborhood school, we want to keep it as it is. So those are the 3 pathways for these ASD schools to come out from under the ASD moving forward. And with that, barring any questions, I renew the motion.
All right. Thank you very much. Members, you've heard the description on House Bill 74. Any discussion for our sponsor? Seeing none, we're now voting on House Bill 74, moving on to full finance. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. House Bill 74 moves to full finance.
Thank you very much.
Members, I'm going to ask you to hold on 1 second. I think there's another committee coming in here, and we just want to make sure that's correct, because if not, we are absolutely going to grab a few more. So hold on one second for us. Well, bad news, folks. It looks like we are going to have to wrap up today. So with that said, we will roll all of those bills that are remaining on the regular and addendum calendar. We will roll those 1 week. Without objection, we stand adjourned. Seeing none, we stand adjourned.